Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Hi, guys. Let's start the day. Shall we? With a little learning. Armchair Historian. Hello, if you're new, my name is Connor. I like to watch and learn things. Let's go. Why was Germany divided after World War II? Good question. I would assume since they were the major belligerent, and then you had the Soviets on one side, on one front, and then the Allies on. I wonder if they. I know that the Soviets beat the Americans and British to Berlin, and I know that both sides really wanted to get to Berlin first, and the Soviets got there first. And I wonder if, but they were still both converging on Berlin, and so I'm not sure it would have been split up if both sides didn't encroach on Germany at the time in synchronization as they did. Because I'm assuming if one side or the other took over Germany before the other side was really entering, then they probably would have occupied the entire thing. But I don't know. That's what we're here to find out. Let's do it. I've been having problems with video quality when I upload recently. I really am trying to fix that.
Hi, I'm Griffin Johnson, the Armchair Historian. While we're all familiar with the plight that the Second World War incurred on Germany, rarely is its aftermath analyzed in great detail. Today, we will dig deeper into why Germany was ultimately divided into East and West, and how the German people suffered during the first years after the war. Could the post-war division of Germany have been avoided? Discuss this topic and more on our Discord. The first discussion about the post-war future of Germany was held at the Tehran Conference in 1943. The Allies agreed on the occupation, division, and new borders of Germany, but the four zones of occupation were only agreed upon at the Yalta Conference in early 1945. Still, it was
Okay, I think I was confusing the two. Okay, sorry.
Agreed upon at the Yalta Conference in early 1945. Still, it was the post-war Potsdam Conference that truly set the groundwork for how Germany was going to be divided and occupied. The British initially were opposed to occupation, concerned about the costs it could incur on their already strapped finances. They were eventually won over by deep American pockets. Instead of administering and policing Germany side by side, as the Allies did in post-war Austria, the decision was made at Potsdam to divide Germany into four distinct occupation zones, one for each Allied nation. The British were assigned the Northwest Quadrant, the French the Southwest, and the Americans the Southeast. As the Red Army already occupied much of eastern Germany, the Soviet Union was put in charge of the Northeast Quadrant.
So it seems like both the US and the Soviet Union got a little slice of, I'm not sure what port this is here. Is Hamburg a port? Is that the one? But I'm assuming just for logistic reasons that the Soviets and Americans got a little slice within the British territory.
Which included Berlin. The French also decided to make the rich coal provinces of the Saarland a protectorate, although this was not recognized by the other major powers. Following its defeat in the Second World War, Germany was stripped of all of the territories it had captured. About a quarter of its old pre-war territory was divvied up between Poland and the Soviet Union. The northern part of East Prussia, the cradle of Prussian militarism, which many blamed for both world wars, was annexed by the Soviets and renamed Kaliningrad Oblast. Meanwhile, the southern part of East Prussia, as well as the rich industrial areas of Silesia and Pomerania, were handed over to the Poles. US and British forces had actually advanced further than they were supposed to according to the Yalta Conference. As a result, they relinquished the territory, and in return the Soviets allowed Berlin to be divided into four sectors. The Allies soon created the Allied Control Council,
thing they
the
did
governing
overreach
body of
then.
post-war Germany. The council was supposed to allow each power to exercise authority over their respective zone of occupation, while still cooperating in decisions that affected the whole country. In reality, this was not the case. The French, with aspirations for a dismembered Germany and Control Council, the governing body of post-war Germany. The council was supposed to allow each power to exercise authority over their respective zone of occupation, while still cooperating in decisions that affected the whole country. In reality, this was not the case. The French, with aspirations for a dismembered Germany and resentful at their exclusion from the conferences, continually blocked any progress toward re-establishing German governing institutions. Meanwhile,
I'm sorry, but what do you? I often say, the classic like white flag surrender stereotype is ridiculous considering France's long history and military history. But in World War II, let's be real, okay? France did not play they played a part, but not as nearly as big of a part in retaking Europe as America and Great Britain did. Is that controversial? I think that's pretty correct. And you wouldn't want someone who has a lot of resentment towards that side to make the judgment. I don't know what I'm. Okay.
Soviets progressed toward re-establishing German governing institutions. Meanwhile, the Soviets were busy dismantling and shipping anything that could be useful to reconstruct their war-torn country. As I'll explain, the economic situation in the zones deteriorated rapidly into mass supply shortages, forcing people to grow their own food, hoard, and steal goods. Today, a similar economic situation, once again fueled by global conflict, is occurring, the effects of which are being felt, fittingly enough.
Please, guys, any of the videos I watch, any of the ads I see, if you are interested in them and you learned it from this video that I'm reacting to, that's not mine, please at least do use their promo codes, their links, okay?
In Germany, where Deutsche Bank is fighting to survive a historic bank run right on the heels of the second biggest bank collapse in US history. And just like post-war Germany, everyday citizens are being impacted. Take the United States, where over half of the people making six figures are currently living paycheck to paycheck. Experts like Goldman Sachs are advising clients to diversify their wealth from stocks and bonds into new alternative assets. Fortunately, platforms that help investors diversify with alternatives perfected their methods long before the bank crisis. In fact, one platform, Masterworks, the sponsor of today's video, turned a profit on every single exit and returned over $25.8 million to their investors last year, even as the economy weakened. Masterworks allows you to invest in iconic art from legends like Picasso and Banksy by breaking the art into shares, so you don't need millions of dollars to diversify with the same assets Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates use.
Picasso,
Masterworks' last three
brought
sales
around
handed
a
back
pistol
10,
that
13,
only had
and
blanks in it,
35%
and whenever anyone would
their
ask him what his painting meant,
offerings on their site
what's the
can sell
meaning,
out
he would
in
like
hours.
fire a blank at him.
Masterworks even has a wait list, but you can skip the wait list by using my link in the description below. Before the Allies met at Yalta and decided upon the four zones of occupation, another plan was devised by the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, Henry Morgenthau. The Morgenthau plan would have seen...
Oh my god, I gotta shut up.
And description below. Before the Allies met at Yalta and decided upon the four zones of occupation, another plan was devised by the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, Henry Morgenthau. The Morgenthau plan would have seen Germany entirely demilitarized and divided into three parts: a northern state, a southern state, and a deindustrialized international zone in the west, administered by the United Nations. The intention was to prevent Germany from ever developing a military industry or waging war in the future. Besides support from US President Franklin D. Roosevelt, the plan was almost universally disliked and was subsequently scrapped. However, the sentiment of harsh measures and pastoralizing Germany to neutralize it as a threat remained. In addition to rampant Soviet and French industrial dismantlement in their occupation zones, the Allied Control Council also limited industrial and steel production. As a result, Germany was reduced to the meager standard of living it had known at the height of the Great Depression. The economic plight of Germany was further exacerbated by the expulsion of ethnic Germans from Eastern territories. These removals remain the largest movement or transfer of any single ethnic population in European history. They occurred in 3 overlapping phases. First was the organized evacuation of ethnic Germans by the Nazi government in the face of the advancing Red Army. The second was the disorganized fleeing of Germans following the Wehrmacht's defeat. And the third was the more organized expulsion dictated by the Potsdam Agreement. Millions of Germans were expelled from Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Hungary. While many contemporaries argued that these expulsions were necessary to prevent ethnic violence, hundreds of thousands would die on the journey, either by Soviet bullets during the war or by cold, stress, and hunger after it. Furthermore, Germans that remained in territories that later fell under the Soviet Union would be deported to camps in Central Asia and Siberia, where they were used as forced labor. As masses of German expellees arrived to the war-torn remains of Germany, shortages of food, housing, and other goods led to conflicts with the local population. France, which had not participated in the Potsdam Conference and thus argued that they did not have to bear the responsibilities for decisions made during it, refused to accept most expellees into their zone. Soon it became apparent that the economic recovery of Europe could not go forward without the reconstruction of the German industrial base. As a result, in July of 1947, U.S. President Harry S. Truman rescinded the harsh occupation directives on national security grounds and stressed that an orderly, prosperous Europe required the economic contributions of a stable and productive Germany. This sentiment was further compounded by the growing needs to rearm the Germans as a potential ally against the Soviets. The Western Allies were increasingly concerned about the deteriorating economic situation in their zones, with the U.S. Occupation Zone Administrator General Lucius Clay remarking, "There is no choice between being a communist on 1,500 calories a day and a believer in democracy on 1,000 calories." As a result, the Marshall Plan was extended to the recently created Buy Zone in 1948, a currency reform which had been prohibited under the previous Morgenthau Occupation Directive introduced the Deutsche Mark. These developments enraged the Soviets, who withdrew from the Allied Control Council and ordered the blockade of Berlin. The Allies responded with the Berlin Airlift, which lasted almost a year. Soon after the Berlin blockade started, the French would join their occupation zone with the Buy Zone, establishing a short-lived Tri-Zone. Later, on May 23rd of 1949, West Germany would be established, followed by East Germany on October 7th. The division of Germany was an improvised matter. While initially the Allies intended to rule Germany in concert with each other, high tensions and the spark of the Cold War meant that neither side wanted to risk damage to their own interests. In essence, this meant that the Allies abandoned East Germany to the Soviets, where it remained until the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War.
Very good video. It is the specter of, the fear of communism, or the specter of the Cold War, so immediately after, honestly, seemingly during the rebuilding of World War II, already the rumblings of disagreement between the Soviets and the West were there. And it's so fascinating. I'd assume because, clearly the hostility or the skepticism was there before the Soviets even had the nuclear bomb. So I wondered if, because the nuclear bomb was around and knowing it was probably only a matter of time before the Soviets made their own one, if that maybe made this really weird phenomenon that seems after such a destructive war that was part two, like a second world war, and so even more like shell shocking, like we can't have this again. The power of the fear of Soviets' fear of the West, or the West fear of the Soviets, just made people immediately stop thinking about World War II and already start thinking about, all right, we need to rearm Germany. We need to think about that. Like right after that, be like, hey, we need to rearm Germany, because of this specter of the Cold War. And again, it's not just one way. Like Soviets, evil bad guy, the West good guy. Even though there are some cases you could make in terms of how they treated the population. But also the West didn't get the destruction from the Germans that the Soviets did, so it's complicated. But yeah, I don't see it as good guy, bad guy, just fascinating. Fascinating. Really good video. Love the channel. Love you guys. Hope you're all doing well. And I'll see you guys next time. If you could answer any of the questions I had or any comments in general, I'd really appreciate seeing them down in the comment section. See you guys next time.